Stone. I'm the CEO of Stone Building Solutions. We are a full service company for all your reporting needs. We do engineering. That means milestones, repair protocols, construction monitoring. We do reserve studies, structural integrity reserve studies, regular reserve studies, insurance valuation appraisals, your wind mitigation reports, and damage claims. I've been in this industry for 25 years, and Stone has been helping communities for over the past decade. The whole idea is to take all your reporting in one. We're very honored this year, 4th year in a row, listed Florida Association Community Journal Diamond Award for Building Envelope Specialist. And today with me, I have Jason Bruce. I've known Jason for many years now. I've seen him get some very big numbers for his clients for construction defect cases. He's always impressed me, his ability to articulate complex ideas. So Jason, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Tara. At Pursiano Law, we do specialize in construction defect claims. We also do first-party insurance claims, and we do turnover issues. So if the community is going through turnover, we help them out with that. I've been doing construction defect claims for a very long time. I took my first case in 1999 when a balcony collapsed and some people fell and got hurt. And it was all because of construction defects. So since that time, I've been representing primarily homeowners associations, condo associations, and building owners, like owners of hospitals and churches and that kind of thing. And I'm very excited to be here. So thank you again, Tara.
Well, excellent. So today we're going to talk a little bit about negotiation, and that's what we both do, right? My background in insurance claims, Stone Claims Group has negotiated close to $1 billion in insurance recovery, and through that becomes a lot of negotiation. And it's by method in which people settle differences. It's the process by which compromise or agreement is reached while avoiding argument or dispute. We can always end up in court in front of a jury and a judge, and they're the final decision makers. But if there's a way we can negotiate and get funds for our clients before we have to go all the way to trial, that's what we want to do. And the same thing comes with rolling out reserves. We don't want to turn it out to this big fight. We want to negotiate with the board, negotiate with the membership so that we can make change happen. And the biggest thing is understanding the adversary is not the person across the table, but it's the situation. Many of these things that we're going to talk about today, not necessarily the steps, but the negotiation tactics, comes from the book, Never Splitting the Difference. There's a famous hostage negotiator. His name is Chris Voss. And to get started, we're going to let him share a little bit about negotiation tips.
You know, I've always sort of thought of it as maybe being like an emergency room doctor. Either you're built for it or you're not. And I was built for it. It was good for me. I enjoyed it. I think the most important thing I learned in my career as an FBI hostage negotiator, which was really that the patience can be a weapon. And if you slow down just a little bit, it gives you enormous advantages. Let things come to you, prompt them in a way so that they will come to you, but let them come to you. A successful negotiator understands that it's got to be a collaborative process, even when the person we're negotiating with might not look at it as a collaborative process. Successful negotiators also, they get the game plan down and then they stick to it. And they're not rattled by changes or unexpected surprises. Actually, surprises are only unexpected if you're afraid of them. If you welcome surprises, they usually bring opportunities. The best way to start a negotiation is really with a good open-ended question. What's the biggest challenge you face? And then actually listen to the answer. A lot of people are used to being asked questions and not having their answers listened to. And they're going to know right away whether or not you're one of those kind of people, whether or not you ask a question and then don't listen to the answer, which then if you turn them off, it gives them permission to turn you off. So it's really triggering an environment with a good question so that the other side knows you're actually listening to what they say. You know, I've always sort of thought of it as maybe.
So did you hear what Chris said? He was really talking about being prepared, having a game plan, and that's what we're going to go over today, a step-by-step game plan of how you as managers and board members can walk into your board. The most important thing is when you come into a board meeting, this is not just a kumbaya session. You guys are there to bridge differences and make decisions and fulfill your fiduciary responsibility to move the association forward. So step by step, this is the game plan. We're going to tell you exactly what to do from start to finish. All of a sudden, Stone Building Solutions has given you your reserve study. Now you know you need to turn around and give it to the membership. Their dues are going to go up every month. No one's going to be happy. And so how do we start to have this conversation? And these tactics can be used not just for reserves, but if you are presenting anything to anyone, it's a sales tactics that you can use to really present ideas. We use it when we're doing claims. Jason uses steps like this when he's doing large construction defect. And the first thing that you have to do is let the person on the other side, in this case might be your board members or might be the membership, know that there is a big undeniable change that gives rise to stakes. We need to stop the paralysis of analysis. So what does that mean? Is that people are going to stay doing exactly what they've done for exactly the same time unless they realize they have no choice but to make a decision. And that's because change is here. They have to understand that it's undeniably happening, that it's happening independently of anyone in that room, and what are the stakes for them. All three must be true if you want to lead them down to the path of questioning of their liking of the status quo. So let's talk a little bit specifically about reserves. What is the change, right? We know the legislative changes here. We know that Surfside and Champlain Towers and the collapse occurred and 98 people died that should not have died. And that's happening. But what does that really mean for them? And that's when we talk about the insurance, banking, and politics. We know that we have the DBPR. We were just last night down in Miami and met with Senator Pizzo, Jennifer Bradley, and Vicki Lopez. They were in Aventura talking about Condo 3.0 coming out. And one of the things that they talked about is for the structural integrity reserve study, there was no change. You still have to do it by December 31st, 2024. You still have to vote on it in 2025, and you still have to fund it by January 2026. The only change there was the fact that there's more transparency. Now you just must give electronic notice within 45 days that you've received the SIRS to the membership and let them know it's available in the official records. So we know, everyone listening to this webinar, that the change is here, but how do we present that to the board? So the law is passed, but what's going to make them actually follow the law? What's going to make them follow the law is when you go to renew your insurance, you're not going to be able to get it because of the fact the insurance companies are going to want to see these reports. If people are going to buy and sell a unit, the banks that are issuing the money are going to want to see the reserves to make sure that the unit owner buying the unit isn't going to be hit with all these special assessments. And if they choose not to do that, what does that mean? That means that the value of their unit is going to go down. So now all of a sudden, if we're talking about the changes here, we just went through the legislative session, nothing has changed. You have to do the structural integrity reserve study. You have to do the milestone, and it's going to hit your pocketbook. You need to start there in the conversation, because if the conversation doesn't start there and you walk into the room and say, okay, everybody, here's your new budget. I hope you saw it. You're going to be paid $500 a month. Everyone's going to be screaming, going to have a million questions, and nothing is going to get done. So the beginning of the board meeting has to be making sure that every single person there understands that the change is happening. It is here. We have a new way of condo living. What do they always say, Jason?
We've gotten along just fine without mandating reserves, and we'll always be fine without it. Living on a prayer, I guess, is the theme there.
And they say, well, there's no condo police. No one's going to come get me in the middle of the night. Who cares if I don't do this stuff? We've been just fine, because call the DBPR, right? No one's coming. But I will say the new bill that we signed by the governor is adding 65 new employees with $7 million every year reoccurring to actually staff and give teeth to the DBPR. So that's another change, that there might be a little bit more of condo police. We know that's going to take some time to roll out, but insurance, banking, and politics will do it. The next thing we have to do is define the enemy. And Jason, I'm sure everyone would like to say, like when you're sitting at that table with opposing counsel, you want to say, oh, you are the bad guy. But the situation really is the bad guy. And Luke fought Vader, Batman fought Batman versus Joker. A super powerful way to turn our unit owners into heroes is to pit them against the enemy. And we don't want the enemy to be you. We don't want the enemy to be the board. We don't want the enemy to be the CAM. We want the enemy to be the old way of thinking. We want the enemy, and we're going to talk about some of those enemies, but we can't let them think the enemy is you. We can't let them think the enemy is the new law, because even if the law wasn't passed, the banking and the or the insurance and the banking would have mandated this anyways. So the legislature just gave framework to something that was undeniably happening after 98 people die. It was interesting. I was giving this presentation earlier this week to a management company, and Jeremiah, who's one of our account executives, said, Tara, you're going to have to do this slide. I don't even remember Blockbuster. And that's how I realized I'm starting to get a little bit older. But we remember Kodak, we remember Blockbuster. We're always, the world's changing and you have to change with the times. So we get to keep talking. I keep trying to hammer in. This is the old way of condo thinking. And it's that non-legacy thinking that we will pay for it later. We will worry about it later. The orange has been squeezed. There is no juice left. And the problem is now that everybody that lives in condos, you're going to have to realize, all right, we're going to have to pay for what we're using as we use it. But on top of that, we got to catch up for the past 10, 20, 30, 40 years that it hasn't been properly funded. So that legacy thinking that we talk about is that I live in this condo, but are my kids, if I had a single family home, you take care of it. You say, maybe my kids will live in here one day, or maybe I'll buy the place next door and we can have a big family compound. And you're thinking about legacy. With a condo, they just want to come down and sit by the pool. They might not even live in the state, or it was purchased maybe as a cheaper way, or investor driven ownership. How many times after 2008, we saw investors hold sometimes 60, 70% of condominiums, and they want to keep reserves down. And that's, Jason, you want to talk, you had brought this point up as the enemy, and I thought it was a very good point, and an enemy that I hadn't really talked about before. Do you want to talk about that third bullet point down?
Yeah, sure. And kind of backing up a little bit, when I represent associations, typically they're a little bit on the younger end, less than 10 years old. And so I see how associations are born and how things are funded from the beginning. And what I've seen consistently is the developers are setting reserves artificially low from the beginning, and they're not doing proper maintenance from the beginning. And they do that because they want to attract people to buy a place that they're selling, and may or may not have enough money to afford assessments that would be the true amount needed to properly do maintenance and properly fund reserve accounts. So when I'm taking a deposition or I'm in trial, the knee-jerk reaction to every lawsuit that I file from the developers and builders and contractors is there was a lack of maintenance. And so I say, okay, what is the proper amount of maintenance? Oh, they should be out there caulking and sealing every year and doing X, Y, and Z to the roofs. And they have this long list of stuff that should be done every year. And I say, okay, well, let's go back in time. You were under developer control for 3 years. Did you do any of that in year 1? No. Did you do any of that in year 2? No. Did you do any of that in year 3? No. When you sold these units, did you tell the general public who was coming in interested in buying a place that everything was set artificially low, and to meet the spirit of what you're testifying to here in court, that all these reserves should have been higher and more maintenance should have been done? Did you disclose that? No. So they get off on the wrong track from day one by setting things artificially low and not funding the reserve properly. And then when turnover occurs, what happens? You build the next year's budget off the former year's budget, and then the cycle continues. Well, that cycle can't continue anymore with this new law that's being passed. So everybody's got to put on their big boy pants and look at reality and do what needs to be done to make sure the buildings are safe. And that's my perspective on that, Tara.
No, it's very fascinating, because do you want to buy a condo where the maintenance fees are $300 a month, or would you rather buy a condo with the maintenance fees are $100 a month? And that's what Jason's saying. Like, they can actually sell these things and get them off their books and get their profits back faster. So it makes sense for them to keep those reserves lower. So that's why it's so important when you're going through a turnover to reach out to Pursiano Law or a firm like theirs, because ultimately they can help you through this process of not only reserving, but making sure that you're actually looking at the building and making sure there's not latent defects. It's not going to come up after the period of repose. The other thing that's really great about the law is, for years, even if you wanted to properly fund the reserves and you were on the board, could you really do it? Like, you couldn't even walk your dog. People would be yelling at you. Why are you making my bills so high? You know, you might not have been able to get the votes because everybody sitting in the room wants to keep the numbers low. We'll pay for it later. I'll be dead by then. I'm not going to live here that long. You know, deal with it later, deal with it later. So even if boards truly wanted to do the right thing, it was set up so it was so easy not to reserve that it was almost impossible for them to do the right thing. So I hear a lot of board members are actually happy because now they can walk into these meetings and say, it's not me, it's the law, it's the insurance company, it's the banks, this is what we have to do. So that's why starting with that number one first step is understanding that changes here is the most important thing. The second step is defining the enemy, to talk about these different concepts, to understand that backstory of how we got here and the why, so that the listeners are framing it to saying, hey, okay, I understand this is a bigger picture. This is not just my board or my CAM out to get me. The next step that you have to do is to make them remember the pain. And it's so important to go through these steps in this order, because if you skip any of the steps, when you get to the final close, you're not going to get there. And you can tell somebody something over and over and over again, but when you ask them questions, and that's what Chris talked about, is asking questions and being willing to hear the answers. When we're doing these major negotiations, questions are my biggest friend, because I can help to identify what the problem is on the other side. And here you're going to help the board members remember what it was like. So you want to ask questions like, hey guys, remember the last time we did that painting project? Remember what it was like when we didn't hire an engineer to oversee them? Who lived here in 2008? How much was your condo worth? Oh my gosh, I couldn't believe my condo went down to $75,000 and now it's $500,000. Well, why did your condo, does everyone know why the condo prices went down in 2008? Who knows here? You have younger people there. They don't know what Blockbuster is. They don't remember the 2008 condo crash. And to understand, wait a second, the prices went down in 2008 because you couldn't get a loan for a condo. And that's what we're talking about with insurance, banking, and politics. The banking will control this and your unit value will go down. This has already happened not that long ago. You know, we just have to look back to history to see how this will replace it. What happened before these laws when you got your last reserve study? You know how many times our firm has heard, hey, can we have an Excel spreadsheet of that? Because we're going to go in and change all the numbers. For the structural integrity reserve study, that's why hiring the right firm is the most important thing that you can do, because you can't change a single number. You have to fund the study to the penny. And then ask them, what was it like with your last assessment? So asking these questions along the way is going to help your audience. It's going to help your board understand, okay, I remember changes here. I know the enemy is not you. Hey, I'm remembering what it was like before. And then we have to tease them with the promise of the new land. And really, can you imagine a board member meeting where everyone's sitting around like this? I took this picture because I'm like, this never happens, no one's this happy at a board meeting. But just literally imagine your job as a community manager. How much time do you spend right now going back and forth, trying to get bids just to get there and them saying, no, we don't want to do it, or the problem becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. Imagine where you have the money to do the proper maintenance in the budget that you need to do. And instead of waiting 18 years to do a concrete restoration project and saying, okay, why is this $10 million and everyone needs to move out? It's so expensive. Imagine being able to address your concrete all the time as it happens and do a major project every 7 to 10 years, like you should be doing on schedule. The cost goes way down. And I use the example all the time of the shower because people walk into the shower. They can imagine this, right? When you get into the shower every single morning and you look down and, I'm washing my hair and I see this crack in my grout. And I think, oh, I really got to get that caulked or resealed. And then you get out of the shower, you go about your day, and the next thing happens the next day, the next day, the next day. And all of a sudden, when you're finally getting around to doing something about it and you get the contractor over there, they're like, ma'am, why did you wait this long? Now the whole shower pan's rotten out. We can't regrout this. You have a major repair. And then I say, well, honey, since we have to do the $10,000 shower pan, I want to remodel the whole bathroom. So if you can recaulk your shower for the $500, or you can redo the whole shower, or maybe end up redoing the whole bathroom, because preventative maintenance is 30 times less than the cost of corrective maintenance. The new world of condo living, where you're paying for things as you use them. And it means like every day that goes by, you're using the roof. Every day that goes by, you're using the paint. And you have that money, the board will be able to make better decisions. The managers will be able to do their job effectively. And the values of your condos will increase dramatically because not everyone's going to do this. And then you will be the ones that really shine.
Hey, Tara,
Yes.
got a comment on that. Can we go back the slide there? First of all, you asked me to do color commentary, and I just want to say that is a nice sweater that guy is wearing. That is just wonderful. But when you talk about the new condo world versus the old, one thing that LCAM should be cognizant of in this transition period is that if you read a traditional reserve study, and they're used, this, what I'm going to tell you about is usually in the beginning or the end, and virtually everyone I've seen during my career has this. It states, this reserve study assumes that the workmanship was done in a code compliant manner and in a good and workmanlike manner. The purpose of this reserve study is not to find latent defects, okay? So when they do their reserve study on the traditional model, they go out and they look, oh, it's a tile roof, 25-year life expectancy, set the reserves accordingly. They didn't pull up the roof tile. They didn't look at the underlayment. They didn't look at the flashing. They didn't look to see if the nail patterns were correct. They didn't look to see if there's already damage to the sheathing. They're just assuming everything is perfect. Same thing with the siding. This is a hardy board siding. It should last 35 to 50 years. Let's set the reserve study funding accordingly with that. That is not reality. To get to reality, people need to understand that they need to hire a firm like Terra's that have real professionals that look deeply into how the buildings were constructed to set a reserve study. And you probably will have people waving that old reserve study. Look, everything's fine. We shouldn't have to do anything to the buildings for a very long period of time. No, it's not reality. Surfside showed that. And probably most people listening to this have had many instances where the reserve study was just woefully inadequate due to latent defects. Well, thank you for that, Tara.
You're welcome. It's true that as a reserve specialist and we send our engineers out, like we're not going to go underneath every single tile. We can do a forensic investigation, but that's why if you're building, let's just stop here right now because I think it's so important with the law changes last year. Do you want to give people the timelines on how long they have to find latent defects? I know it's a sidebar, but it's important.
Yeah, the latent defects, you have 4 years from the date you knew or should have known there was a problem. Okay. So if you see a small crack in the stucco, that's probably not enough to put a layperson on notice that there is an underlying issue with the waterproofing of the cladding system. But if you have a homeowner saying, I'm getting water intrusion right in that area where there's a crack, the clock is probably running. The biggest danger that homeowners associations have with respect to latent defects is things in their file where somebody's emailed about a window leak, a roof leak, and nothing was done for over 4 years. Or there's just large amounts of cracking and nobody did anything about it. Or you have the quasi-expert in the room where they stand up at a meeting and there's copious minutes being taken and they say, I watched this place being built and they reverse flashed every single window. I want you to do something about it. And that goes into the minutes and the board says, thank you, Bob, for your comments and thank you for keeping it under 3 minutes. Next, and everything's tabled and 4 years go by. So be very cognizant of CAMs whenever an issue is reported that might relate to construction, that you look into it and advise the board to hire a professional to get to the bottom of what's going on, because you don't want to be in the position of somebody 5 years later saying, we have this property management company looking out for our best interests. Issues were being reported to them. It's now documented that those defects are known, but nothing was done for 5 years. We're told we have a $16 million claim to get all these things fixed, but we can do nothing about it because we sat on our hands. So that's a big concern with latent defects. And I hope if you remember anything from what I say today, write that one down. You got to do something within 4 years of there being a suspicion.
So when we come out and do a structural integrity reserve study and the building is under 7-10 years old, we are keeping an eye out for those things. We were able to alert the board like, hey, I think we need to take a deeper look into this. And that's just not for new construction, but if you've done any major construction project, the same thing holds true. But let's get going back to the presentation. So number 1, we said we need to tell them that the change is here. Number 2, we've defined the enemy. Number 3, we've asked them questions so they can remember their pain. Number 4, we are telling them, okay, this is the promised land. This is what it's going to look like. If we can band together as a community, and that's what we are, and we can get over this hump, then it's going to be so much better in 5 and 10 years from now. And at Stone Building Solutions, I think that that's one of our big differentiators, is that we understand, and it's our duty and our obligation to help our communities through this difficult time become financially and structurally sound. And we're going to do as much as we can to work with those SIRS to keep the numbers down. And then we can tweak them in 3 years and tweak them in 3 years and tweak them in 3 years so that we can kind of get into this new world way of condo living. It's not like we can just snap our fingers and be there, and to have a firm that understands that and works with you is extremely important. So getting back to our presentation here. Bear with me 1 second while I do that. They're still having a great time, Jason, see? So the next thing we need to do is use conversations to flush out objections. And when Chris Voss said, no, I don't welcome, I'm not afraid of challenges, I welcome them. You really, really, really want to hear what people are saying, and you don't want them to go on this forever complaining and not getting to the point, but we're going to use specific techniques that you can use to get to really what they're saying, because what they're saying many times is not what they actually say, right? They always have another problem. So mirroring is using the last 1 to 3 words a person says. And it's like when you said, oh, I can't hear you, and someone repeats themselves louder, they usually just don't repeat the same words. They expand on those words. And you can't say to someone all the time, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. but you can use the last 1 to 3 words and they get the mental clue that they're not hearing me. I need to explain more. It also makes interesting people seem more interested, people seem more interesting. So when you ask more questions and you're doing this, it might sound like, oh, they could totally tell that I'm mirroring, but they can't. You can do it over and over and over again, and they don't know. So let's let Chris Voss tell us a little bit about his mirroring technique.
The mirroring that I teach is not the same as the way most people think of mirroring. Most people, when they think of mirroring, they think mirroring body language, mirroring tone of voice, even using the same words. It's not that at all. The mirroring that I teach is much more simplistic, and interestingly enough, has a great impact on how the other person interacts with you. And it's just repeating the last 1 to 3 words that they've said, word for word, 1 to 3 words, or it's repeating a selected 1 to 3 words. And what it really does is it helps connect people's thoughts. There will almost never be a time when you've mirrored the last 3 words of what someone said when they want to go on and explain and reword and expand. And that mirror, what it's just done is it helps give you a better understanding of what the other person is trying to say. It also gives you more time to think. It's a way to buy time in a negotiation. The mirroring that
So let's try a little bit of it. Jason, why don't you be the board member?
Okay, Jared, when you told me we were gonna do this kind of stuff, I was worried because I wasn't like in high school drama or anything. And I need to kind of get into character here and be more compelling. So just give me a second. There we go. All right. So I'm the board member, right?
Yes.
Okay. These budgets need some improvement.
Need improvement.
Yeah, well, we can cut out in the landscaping and playground renovations. We can increase spending on roofing.
On roofing?
Yeah, for example, like last night I was coming home from Whole Foods, and you know how much groceries cost at Whole Foods. I went to my entryway and water was just dripping onto me, right onto my grocery. It makes me really upset.
I can see how it'd be upset. The water was dripping. You said it was coming from the roofing. Was it the actual roof?
From the roofing, yeah, you know where the gutter is right there? It seems to be coming from that area.
Oh, I understand. So it seems like, I mean, with that kind of hair, Jason, you don't want to get your groceries or your hair even wet. That makes a lot of sense. So it seems like if we could possibly address the gutters, they maybe need to be reset. I'm so glad that you brought that to my attention, that the budget isn't the issue, but we just need to make sure that we put in to address those gutters.
I think that would be helpful because I know I'm not alone.
So you see how we just use those same words and all of a sudden he says this budget needs some improvement. And as the board or as the CAM, if you want to be defensive and be like, what are you talking about? We hired the best vendor. We spent so many hours. We've done all this stuff. What do you mean? Why don't you do it if you think you know how to do it? You just said needs improvement. Like on roofing, you keep asking that same question because you're going to find it's nuts. Like when you use this technique, you're going to be like, do they know that I'm doing it? Number one, they don't know. And number two, it flushes out so many different scenarios. Next, you can use labeling. You can use words like seems like, looks like, because it diffuses negative emotions and enforces positive ones. If you talk about the way that you see someone's feeling or what they're thinking or what they're intending, it makes them feel heard, right? And we all just want to be heard. And if we're showing up and spending the time, and in that last scenario, I said, it seems like if we would address the gutters, that it would be okay. And he was like, well, what exactly can I say to that? So let's go ahead and try this. Oh gosh, we got a different board member.
I think this budget is unrealistic, yo. I am going to get an alternative budget proposed.
Jason, it sounds like you don't believe this budget reflects the true cost.
Yeah, you have $8,800 for a SIRS and it's not even required yet. I want to keep the dues down, not because of me. You can see I'm very successful with the bling, but just for, the common folk in here.
Well, it seems like you're doing everything you can do for the community, and you don't want to make sure that people don't have these huge jumps in reserves.
That's what I'm saying.
It seems like it's not that you don't want to follow the law. You just want to make sure that we're not spending money on that we shouldn't need to spend.
Yeah, we need to follow the law. I'm just looking out for people. So yeah, we got to do what we got to do.
All right. So when we use mirroring and labeling together, it can be very powerful in negotiation. So this brings the walls down and gives you more information. And I do it naturally because I use these techniques all the time. I've already started to use them. So if you say, about the roofing, and then it seems like you don't want to get your hair wet, and it seems like you want to do the right thing, or seems like you want to follow the law, it looks like we're on the same page. If we could address the gutters, all of a sudden these techniques start to work together. There's another technique, and it's called mislabeling. So people think, like, if you know how they're feeling, why would you ever want to mislabel what they're feeling? And the reason is because it gives the other person the opportunity to correct you. And you can do it in multiple different ways. Let's use this one. Jason, I think you have to be the rock star again, the bling guy.
I'm down to my last wig here, but I think it should fit the part. Let's push this and get more quotes.
It seems like you don't want to follow the law. And complete.
No, I know what we should and have to do, but I think we should do it in 2025.
In 2025?
Yeah, 2025, that gives us time to fund.
Well, it seems like you do want to follow the law. If I were to tell you that I attended the legislative session last night with the senators, Jennifer Bradley, Vicky Lopez, Jason Pizzo, that actually passed the law, and our lobbyist, Travis Moore from CAI, and the new bill that's in front of the governor confirms that it must be done by 12/31/24, and they didn't give any extension even this year, would that make sense to you that we should probably do it in 2024 so that we're compliant?
If our hands are tied, our hands are tied. We don't want to make things worse by not following the law. So we just got to do what we got to do.
All right, so we've gotten a whole bunch of different bids, and we've interviewed these companies, and we believe as the board, this is our best option, not only for the cost of the structural integrity reserve study, that's far less important than the person that does the report, because we're going to have to fund this to the penny. And I know you mentioned you didn't want a huge jump in cost, and we want as much information as possible. So as the board, what we're trying to do is to give you the full picture ahead of time, so we're not kind of just sidelining you at the last moment. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Let's just figure out what our best option is.
Thank you.
Do I get an Oscar or a Tony or an award for this? I feel like I need an agent.
Well, you're doing acting. Do you want to do this slide?
No.
All right, I'll do it. So the playful positive voice, I'm using that probably more than 80% of the time, probably 90, 95, because life is short, right? Why not be happy and positive? But I do use the late night DJ voice, and I use it when I'm trying to make a point. Because when you start to speak softly, and I know, Jason, you talked that you do this in trial many times, and you really, really get to the point of what you're trying to say, people listen. Because when your cadence is up and down and happy and positive, and you say, look, Jason, I'm going to have to tell you, what's really going to happen this year. And if we don't follow it, your condo is going to be worth 50% less. All of a sudden, everyone's like, wait, what did she say? What did she say? So using that late night DJ voice can be highly effective with you as a board member or as a CAM when you're getting your point across. And then of course, you can't handle the truth because sometimes we have to do this by 2024. We don't have a choice, people. You have to use that direct voice in order to change your tones so that you can control the conversation.
Yeah, one example I can give you of that is in trial, I have to use a lot of different techniques to get the testimony I want out of what we call a hostile witness, somebody that is adverse to my client, and they're doing everything that they can not to admit to a fact that's important. And so I'll ask a question and they'll answer a different question. I'll move to strike, ask the question again. They still go off and talk about things that don't have anything to do with my question. And I want to just show the jury that there was this open and obvious condition at the construction site, and this superintendent was there on June 23rd. I've asked him 4 times, were you there? He said, well, I get really busy and blah, 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 blah. I said, were you there on June 23rd? Well, I have to look at my logbook. I, don't have that logbook. Blah, 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 blah. And so I'll try other techniques, such as there are 8 people sitting in that juror box. They have taken their times out of their life to find the truth here today. You have not answered my question. Answer the question. Were you there on June 23rd? So that might be a direct approach. They may or may not answer it. But one thing that seems to always work with these tough people, and maybe such a direct approach would work in a meeting, is I'll either take off my glasses and point the arm at the witness, or I'll point my pen at them and I'll use their full name, just like his mother, and say, Conrad Wilson Johnson, were you or were you not there on June 23rd? I was. So the direct approach, sometimes works, and it's a great way to get people's attention by changing the cadence of your voice, the volume of your voice. Sometimes when everybody in the room is loud and hostile, the way you calm people down and get them focused is to be the voice of reason in the room. Hey, let's come together and really think about what's going on here. And I can give you a great example that happened last night. There was a community that I represented, and just imagine getting a notice that everybody's balconies are being condemned by the building department. So we had an emergency meeting last night, and people came in, and guess who they were mad at first? The CAM, me, and the board. Because if we hadn't done the inspections, everybody would have been fine, right? How could you bring this to our attention? Now we can't sell our units. Now we can't go on our balconies. No, 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 no. Everybody's screaming. So I had to be the voice of reason. So I just talked very quietly. Look, this doesn't have anything to do with whether or not we did inspections. It doesn't have anything to do with the CAM's motivations. Yes, I'm a lawyer, and I do want to represent you because you have problems, but I'm not the enemy. The problem here is that the balconies were not built correctly, and we need to do something right away and nip this in the bud. So stop the accusations and focus on what needs to be done. And that tone of voice oftentimes resonates with even the most hostile person, so that they will pay attention and focus their energy where it needs to be, which is, yes, I volunteered my unit for inspection. Let's get through this as a community. So.
And Jason was following the changes here. It doesn't matter. It's undeniable. He defined the enemy, right? And that's what he was talking about. It was exactly, he was following the same steps that we're going in his example of last night.
And they had mosquitoes there.
It's outside. Oh, I hate late night outside by the pool meetings. All right. The power of no. Like, people say, oh, the person with the most no, you want to get yes, you want to get yes. But a lot of times I like to use the word no, because imagine when you walk into a car dealership, right? And you're there literally to look for a car. And they're like, can I help you? And like, no, I don't want to be helped. Like, you don't want to say yes, because if you say yes to these people, then you feel like they're never going to leave you alone, right? You walk into a clothing store. Hey, what do you need? Like, oh, just lay off me a little bit. So when you ask people where they feel like, do you agree with this budget? And they have to say yes. Now all of a sudden they don't want to say yes because they're feeling like they're agreeing to everything. So when we use the word no, it makes us, any person, feel more in control. It makes us feel like there's no commitment behind it. But when you say yes, you feel like you're confirming to everything, even if you're confirming to something. So when negotiating, paraphrasing your questions to be no questions, you'll ultimately get the process moving faster. So if you say things like, do you agree with the terms of the new budget? Instead, you say, are the terms of the new budget unreasonable? Because if you're saying agreeing to the budget, then they're like, oh, I don't want to agree to the budget. They're not going to say yes, right? Because the water is dripping on his head and he's really mad about the water. So he's saying no to the budget. And then you say, are the terms for the new budget unreasonable? No, the terms are not unreasonable. I'd just like to make this one adjustment. One adjustment? Yeah, like I want to get the water not dripping on my head. Seems like if we could make this adjustment, then maybe we could buy into moving forward with, if we could address the gutter under your maintenance provision because it's less than $10,000, we can take care of that. If we take care of that, would we be able to move forward with this proposed budget? So going through the steps from start to finish, the changes here, define the enemy, remember the pain, glimpse into the future, the new promised land, flush out objection using mirroring, labeling, mislabeling, the power of no, and tone of voice. And then finally, this is where you present your best evidence that address the real concern and provide the situation. Only now you can roll out the reserves. You had to go through all those steps first before you could now slide this paper and say, okay, everybody, I want to open up and we're going to get to where we are. Because if you don't, the board meeting is going to turn into a total mess. We've all been there. People are screaming. You can't even get your point across. So rolling out the new structural integrity reserve study, it's very effective if you follow these steps. At Stone Building Solutions, we can help you with this process. One of the things that we do is review the structural integrity reserve study with the board and if the membership as needed to make sure that this rolling out the reserve process is a little bit easier for you as a CAM. Jason, you want to talk about just some roadblocks that you deal with just in negotiation or as a whole?
Yeah, in negotiations that I deal with, I do have relationships with a lot of the big builders. Even some of the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies give me a back channel number if everybody's not behaving correctly at negotiations to call him with his attorney in the room, of course, and we talk about what's going on and why this case needs to settle and that the defense isn't adequately monitoring the case, defending the case, and have a accurate reality of what's going to happen if it goes to a jury. So those back channels are great in terms of relationships. Also, the relationships that I develop with the insurance companies that provide insurance to these contractors, they've been developed over a very long time, and many of them I can talk to directly and just tell them, look, this is your exposure and so forth, and they can appreciate it. And oftentimes having those kind of conversations, I might just get something as simple as this that was a roadblock that I didn't even know was there. I say, Jason, you're asking my subcontractor here to pay $2 million, but as you know, these insurance companies, we don't pay for the defect itself, we pay for resulting damage. I need to see some photos of resulting damage, then I can get you the money. Okay, well, I build a link, boom, send them tons of pictures showing resulting damage and the case resolves. So those types of relationships that I build over time are very important. The not having trust aspect is the most difficult one to get around initially. But if you talk fairly to people and don't over puff things, if you will, if you have a $25 million claim, don't pound the fist and say you'll never ever settle for less than 100. when you know you're gonna settle for 25 because, you know, from that case and those going forward, they're gonna realize that you always just come with a bunch of hot air and you don't get serious for a while. So, you know, maybe you start off at $30 million, give yourself a little bit of wiggling room, and that will keep trust going forward. So those are the kind of things that I try and keep in mind when I'm dealing with the defense. And everybody is looking for a common enemy, right, to get these cases resolved. That was one of the themes today. So what is the common enemy that I deal with? Well, we've sued the contractors and their insurance companies have gotten involved. The association, they want the money to fix their defects and fix their damage and live happily ever after. The contractors and the insureds, they want a release. And the tools that they have for release are, or to give in exchange for the release, are the monies that the contractors have in their own pockets, and then the insurance policy money. And we cobble that together, and one decision maker at a time, try and get to the common enemy, which is we need to get enough money together to deal with the association's damages. And it's a puzzle, and it's complicated at times, but defining that with everybody in the room does make a big difference. So what Tara is saying is important for any type of negotiation, and defining the enemy, the needs, listening to the complications that are going on the other side, and getting to yes, ultimately. Yes, meaning a handshake, we have a deal.
And the last one that's on the slide here is the owner that doesn't want to let go. So rolling back, going back to the reserves and the funding and where we're here, if you get to this point and you have an owner that doesn't want to let go, it means it's not the owner's fault, it's your fault, because you did not get step number one done. Because if you truly articulated that the change is here, it's happening independently of them, and it gives rise to stakes, maybe they just need some time. But at that point, I would circle back to step one and start through the total process again, because it means that you missed the fundamental buy-in right from the very beginning. So some things that I like to do at Stone Building Solutions is to have, and advise our CAMs to do, is have discussions with board members ahead of time, non-quorum, kind of one-on-one. Let's look at these. Let's kind of talk about some concerns. It might be with just members that, you know, that are vocal, that always show up, giving them a little time ahead of time, having discussions with influencers. I always ask our CAMs, okay, I want you to reach out to your insurance agent, call up Nagar, ask her what it's going to be like if you are renewing your insurance and you don't have these. So then as a CAM, you can say that, hey, I called our insurance agent. They said if we don't get this milestone done, she's not going to be able to renew us next year. Things like that. Discussions, involvements with vendors. Using your vendors as a board and as a CAM is the most important thing that you can do. You know, reach out to Jason and say, you know, they're talking that maybe I have a construction defect. Let's talk about that. Let's reach out to us because we're providing your insurance valuation appraisals, your engineering. Let's reach out to your paint contractor. Hey, this reserve study says that the paint is going to cost $600,000. I'm going to call Matt Weiss and say, hey, I'm seeing 600,000. And he might say, yeah, like we painted it before and it was 300,000, but that was pre-COVID and labor and everything's gone up. And that sounds like a realistic price. Now you can say in front of the board, hey, I talked to our paint contractor and they verified the numbers in this reserve study. Making sure you have a clear agenda of what's going to happen at that meeting is so important to keep everyone in track, and then to pre-distribute the material. The last thing you want to do is, I didn't have time to review this, I don't have questions. And when we're doing a mediation for insurance, one of the things that's so important is to get our engineering ahead of time, because a lot of times the attorneys that come to these large settlements, they are not the ones with the authorization. So they might have to go to like a Lloyd's of London, and you might have to get surplus lines, 13 different carriers, and get approval for dollars and cents coming into that mediation. So making sure that we're pre-distributing that material is so critical, and it should be critical for you as the CAM and as the board to make sure this gets out ahead of time. Using words like and instead of but, share, help, we, bridge, those words are really important because as the blood pressures start to rise, it's your job as the CAM and the board to help kind of move it back down. Yeah, I always have to remind myself, don't be stubborn, right? Because like we've done so much work and I know that I'm right and I know the client's right. And always keep in the back of your mind, okay, this is not, what is the enemy, right? You have to tell yourself that. You're not just telling your opponent that. I have to constantly be telling myself as a negotiator, because we can all get wrapped up into our own stories, right? We can kind of believe our own nonsense. So here at Stone, sometimes when we're negotiating large claims, we have to say, we're going to take a good hard look at ourselves. And sometimes when you've been pushing something for so long, you're not open to the other side. Now, wait a second. Let's look at it from their perspective. How are they seeing? What's the opposite to the case? How can we overcome that? So as the board and as the manager, being open when you use those flushing out in the conversations, that we have to take a good hard look of what we're doing too, because what we're hearing may make sense. It may not, because many times they haven't been involved in the process, but that's really important. And the last thing that I think is extremely important in getting buy-in from the boards when you're rolling out these reserves is when you get to that final step, piece 6, and after you've done all the steps and now you're rolling it out, to also first start with the timeline of what you've done to do that. Okay, look, guys, we knew this laws were coming. We investigated the laws. We went out and we watched. We saw there's many different companies doing this. We watched Stone Building Solutions. We watched how they dealt with other clients. We looked at their reviews on 5-star reviews on Google. We watched their videos on how they do things. They have an engineer come out. They have a reserve specialist actually do the reserves. They are doing everything they can to work us through the process. We called and checked references. We talked to our agent. We talked to our attorney. We believe that we're giving you the best vendor here possible to do it, instead of just, hey, here we got these people and this is what they said, right? Explaining the steps along the way. When we're doing a case for insurance, like what we're going to present to the other side is not, oh, these roofs went through a storm, they all need replaced. Is saying, hey, we come out, we did a thorough investigation of the roof. The first thing we did is we pulled all the repair records for the past 10 years. We pulled the meeting minutes to see what leaks were done. The leaks have gone up 35% since the storm, and you can see this graph how it's gone and elevated. Our client has done all the temporary repairs that they need to do. We didn't just throw this number out. We went out and got multiple bids to show the insurance company this is fair market value. And on top of that, because we know that tile roofs can be repaired, we went ahead and had one of a trusted vendor, this is a GAF Platinum Elite certified vendor, go up and actually attempt the repair process. And we videotaped it for you, the client, the insurance company on their side, to see that we attempted to do the repair that you suggested. And we're only asking for full replacement because you can see based on the video that that repair can't be made. You see how that's so different than just saying, you owe us for these roofs, to walk them through the process. And for you as the board and you as the CAM to walk someone through the process and to say how you talk to these influencers, you talk to your attorneys and you looked at the reviews and you've seen all these things, is really going to hopefully help them appreciate all the hard work that you do for them. So in closing, I just want to make sure you guys understand everything we do. It's a very unique concept. And the reason that we started doing all these things is because doing insurance claims for so many years, I look under the hood and saw that all these reports weren't concise, they weren't compliant, they didn't talk to each other. So that's why it's all in the hand. We do the reserve studies, the appraisals, engineering, construction monitoring, structural integrity reserve studies, and damage claims to make sure that we present clear, concise, packaged information for you as the board. And Jason, do you would like to kind of close out with a few of your tips and telling them how that they can you can service them at Pursiano Law?
Well, if you suspect that you have construction defects or have a question about the law, feel free to give me a call. Always happy to take your call. And if you're in one of those situations where you're not sure if you have a big enough concern to hire a firm like mine, please give me a call anyway. I'm happy to go out and do an inspection, look things over and see if you perhaps have a much bigger case than you suspected, or that, those couple window leaks that were called in, they may be systemic. They may just have shown up in other locations and so forth. So I'm happy to walk the property with you and take a look to see if it makes sense to dig further. And with that, I guess
They
I don't know.
find you.
What's that?
How can they find you?
The easiest way to get a hold of me is to call at 407-636-7700, or you can email me at jbruce, that's JBRUCE, @Pursiano.com.
And spell out Pursiano.
That's with a P. PURSIANO.com.
Excellent. And you can get a proposal. All you have to do is go into our website and say request a proposal right at the top. It's Stone BLDG, short for building, Stone Building Solutions, stonebldg.com, and we'd be happy to provide you a proposal. Thank you guys so much for your time and joining us today. Next month, we are going to have the Senator Bradley and Senator Lopez talking about these new laws that are coming out. That's April 10th, and we're excited to see you again soon. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.